For coming, and thank you guys for being here. Why are we here? Originally, we talked to Selassie Atadika because she was coming to Berlin. We did already an online event in 2021, I think. Definitely in the midst of the pandemic, when we had our symposium, and you're here this week because you're cooking in Berlin, and we thought, what a great coincidence. What about if people can come to your dinner and still want to learn more about your work? We wanted to make a little meet and greet, and then I got in touch with African Food Festival and Juice and Lian, who organize it, and they said, yeah, it would be great to be also part, because I thought it would be really cool to also have the Berlin perspective on African food and the food scene. And then Lian was really interested and was like, hey, actually my friend Lydia is also in town and she's part of the Ghana food movement. She should be on this panel. I was like, great. So now we're 4 people here on this panel, and I'm actually really happy about it. I want to start with introducing you and your work a little bit briefly. Selassie, you're a chef in Accra. You have your restaurant there, Midunu. You're also one of the founding members of Ghana Food Movement, which is also a coincidence right now. You also work at the UN, and you also have a chocolate business. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you became all of those things and what your what your path was, and why do you do what you do right now?
I just got lost. Let's see, how did I start? I think for me it's been a very winding journey, but I think every single stop has had its purpose. Initially, when I was 5 years old, I told my parents I wanted to be a doctor. And so that was kind of my path for the first part of my education. So I went into college pre-med, and prior to that I was in the lab making anesthesia and aspirin, E. coli research on the weekends, and then I decided that it wasn't it, but I took the math and the science and turned it into something else. When I got to sort of my second year in university, I started doing geography, human geography and environmental studies, and for me that was a time where I really had a chance to understand the impact that we have on the environment, what we can do for that, as well as understanding how people gain power through space and place. And kind of bringing all that together, I ended up working at the UN for over a decade. I traveled to over 40 African countries, ate really, really well, and just started seeing how food was connecting people, food could transform people, and I just felt really strongly that we could create economies in the continent around food. One of the last things I did while I was working for the UN was I was supporting a response to malnutrition in the Sahel, and trying to figure out how to make sure this medicine, which is made out of sort of fortified peanut butter, was getting into the port of Lagos and then all the way to the affected areas in northern Nigeria. And I'm standing in northern Nigeria looking around, and I'm like, we can grow peanuts here, and the product is actually coming from France. And that's when I was just like, there's something wrong, and we need to really do better. We have a lot of the possible solutions around us, and how do we do that? So I decided that I wanted to understand more about the sort of culinary space, because I already had sort of the advocacy space. My master's degree is in international affairs, so I really understood a little bit more about that. So I did the culinary thing. I did a crash course for 1 month, and then started a pop-up with some friends. And I think with that piece, I was able to understand the vocabulary for the language of the culinary space. I already knew the flavors from what I was eating from different aunties and grandmothers, but I didn't have the way to communicate that in a culinary way, and then I was able to get that. I got some practice, and when I moved back to Ghana, 10 years ago now, I did not want to be the one that came back and had a lot of complaints about everything. So I started off just doing sort of these pop-up dinners, and I call them nomadic dinners because of my nomadic lifestyle, and also because we were moving around the city. I then decided that actually, through the process I just learned a lot, and I understood some of the bottlenecks that I didn't understand before, and it just allowed me to be a stronger advocate to talk about why things were not going the way they were, and actually being able to propose solutions, and not just kind of be like the complainer. So that's kind of my long winding path, but I mean, I think every single element has allowed me to be able to cook richer food, to be able to speak more with authority in terms of what are some positive ways and things that we can do. I started off, just to kind of round up, I started off with the pop-ups, and then I realized that a lot of the information wasn't there, so I did a lot of research, which allowed me to be able to find the ingredients, but also to understand the ingredients. And then I decided, okay, well, there's a piece that needs to be the research and the documentation, and that's the Midunu Institute. And then I also realized that not everyone can come to my table. And also one of the most underutilized ingredients found in Ghana was cocoa. But I wanted to find a way to have a conversation by giving someone what they know, which is chocolate, and what they don't know, which are the flavors and the ingredients from around the continent. And so for me, the chocolates became a gateway drug to sort of people being able to know more about the cuisine in something that was easily approachable.
I love that you're connecting theory and practice so well, and we will talk about the project in a second. Lydia Amenyaglo, you're here last minute crash, but it's really great that you could join. Thank you for spending your holiday with us also. You're the creative director of the Ghana Food Movement, and you're also the founder of Plenty Plenty, which is a regenerative cocoa farm. Can you tell us real quick what Ghana Food Movement is and why you started it, or why it was started?
Where do I begin? So the Ghana Food Movement is a grassroots network of different people who are all passionate about food, from farmers to chefs to manufacturers to entrepreneurs, but also to people like me who have no background actually in food. But I found my identity in food. So just to make a little excursion, I was for a long time not connected to my African roots, and so I grew up in Germany, and my father, he's a Ghanaian, and a few years ago I came to Ghana, and I went to the land of my father, and which is now called Plenty Plenty Africa, and it was a cocoa farm, and he showed us the land. He said, one day all this will be yours, and in that moment it kind of made click for me that all these years my father was working for us and was working that cocoa farm so that we can have a future one day. And so I was really starting to respect food a lot more, starting to respect cocoa a lot more, and I said I want to do something with it. So in 2021, I came to Ghana, and I started building Plenty Plenty Africa, but I also started looking out, okay, who are other people in the food space, and I stumbled upon Ghana Food Movement, which was then just really a few people, and I think it was shortly after Selassie also founded it. Back then it was very chefs focused, but then people like me started also becoming part of that movement, and we started growing it and thinking about, okay, how can we have a lot of people have access to food who are usually not so much connected to food. And we started thinking we can do food safaris, we can do dinners, all the different angles that you can really explore food with, and that you can also celebrate food with. So the Ghana Food Movement has really turned into this movement. That's why we also call it movement, because we're quite fluid, I would say, in what we're doing. We're not really an organization, but we're also not really a company. We're really a movement. And just so that you have a little bit of a vibe, I would like to show you a short video, because I feel like we're not a regular movement. And just real quick, so the Ghana Food Movement, I think we are very, we work across industry, so we also work across the arts industry, the music industry. We have lots of DJs in the movement, because we think that really food transcends everything. Let's go.
Thank you. That gave us a really good impression. We need a video like that as well. And last, Kwame introduced Owusu, who is, I have a really long list of things that you're doing. You're a founder of various platforms for African food culture here in Berlin, which is Ayoka, the space where we are here tonight. Thank you for letting us be here tonight. Also Hidden Locations and the African Food Festival that I already mentioned, and the Black Business Dinner. You want to tell us what all of them are and what the goals of these various events are?
First of all, welcome everybody to Ayoka event space. This is one of the spaces which belongs to the Hidden Locations. This is the real company behind all the spaces, and also partner spaces which we rent out. I know, I'm sorry that my English is not that kind, like of them or three of them. So if I make a little bit mistakes, maybe I can switch in German sometimes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'll try my best. First English, but if that works out, I will switch. My journey is little. I want to break it down short. Born in Ghana, raised in Ghana, came here like the age of 8 years. Was, you can say, socialized in Germany. School education, studying economics, break up, don't listen kids. And I started own company. It was the advertisement company, but mine, like I would say, my heart was always like more in the event industry. So I was always that part in our company who was always like responsible for the event part. And later I broke up and joined my own company, which was fully focused on events. And then I started to like get a lot of customers or few customers, but they trust me that not I only found like locations for them, so I also like do the production also for them. And so this was like huge companies, but a sort of them, and this made me some one day to realize that most of the locations are not really built up well, like which my clients or my customers want. So I started to say I want to do that on my own. So this is the beginning of Hidden Locations. Hidden Locations was founded like 2017, but I was in the industry agency part on event location, but way back then, like 15 years ago already. So it was like a sort of roots which I built up then Hidden Locations, which is now growing, and we want to also build up further locations and also connect on create with other locations as well. And doing all this situations was like a moment where my little daughter was like not knowing what kind of society we live in, and he got like, how do you say, obstacles become what about how do you say, the heritage or the where I belong, where she belong. So this was like a questioning a lot of things where I started to, hey, maybe you have to do something. And Lydia, my wife, she was always in the food scene, so she was always knew what is going on. Even the first time when we was in Ghana, she came to me, she said, hey, do you know that all your food is only vegan? I was, what? What vegan? Vegan. So I didn't know even, to be honest, I didn't know about vegan. It was 2006, I didn't know. So, and she was like, no, your sort of food is always like basements with meat or other stuff. It's very, very healthy. And so this is the first time I was thinking about food already. And it was like, he was always more to take a look, hey, let's buy local and all this stuff. I was not into it. So in this part, when it started, and I was thinking about, hey, let's do something, and I was more on the event part, and she was in the food, so the idea of African Food Festival came up. So we see, let's get this both connected, and even it's a good ground that the people like our kids and even especially the mixed kids and also the African kids here in the community get a place and even also a place for the Germans to learn about the African culture, to learn about how do you say, break up with cliches, not because they don't know the rich of the African food. So this was the aim, to bring them together to say, hey, we can not build up 54 countries, but we can start with like some we know. Even I learn every time, how do you say that? When I see like a country like Togo or Benin, I was like, oh, there's a similarities to our food, but it's different. And sometimes like something how you say it's very tasty, and sometimes I don't like it. But the most of the thing is that you get like a rich varieties, and this was our aim to bring that like on the land map. That's also the Germans or the Mehrheitsgesellschaft can learn about the majority of like diverse of the African food as well. But when we was doing it, we came to a lot of things that we find out that we are not represented well. So Jana was thinking about, hey, maybe we can have the younger entrepreneur like cooking people. They are not in the system. They want to build up like restaurants. They want to like also take part of our African Food Festival, because every one of them who came in, we make a research. They have to cook, and if they pass, they can take part of the African food. So we make it not easy, because we know that the responsibility from our side, how the people look on our food, on how the people take part of it, we get a responsibility. So we want to deliver a good part of our work. So that's why sometimes it's not so easy to communicate with people. They say, why you make it not so easy for us? And I say, yeah, they're outside, they will not make it easy for you as well. So that's why we try to portray a picture of African food and African heritage as well, in a good condition, not with cliches, not with all this stuff, because there's a lot of things coming up. Even the younger generation, they are full of ideas, full of trends, and there's a lot of things coming. So this the way we want to show up. And so this turn on, and then came the COVID, so we was have to break up. And this was the idea which came up with the Black Business Dinner during the COVID, that I found out that there are a lot of maybe entrepreneurs like me, they need to connect it as well. And this was always my aim, good conversation come with good food. So that's why we meet up in a good situation. But I was always try to portray a new style or a new variant of food situation. And so this is why we started with African Black Business Dinner, where we always invited one chef or food vendor of us to cook for us. And it's always like mind-blowing for the people, because they could not imagine that, like, you know, some food is African or whatever, or they never eat like manioc or what, you know, the different type of food. So this is the journey we made to right now.
Thank you. I want to take a little step back, because we at the Gemeinschaft, we always talk about food culture, and also when I went through the Ghana food movement, there was a lot about our food culture, and also in your work you always talk about it. And I would be curious to start with, to know from you what you mean and what you think about when you think about food culture in your work, what it means to you.
Let's see. I think for me, my family left Ghana when I was about 5 years old, and so I grew up in America. And one of the ways in which we held on to our Ghanaian culture was through food. My mother cooked for us every single day, except Mother's Day and her birthday, and then I let her take a break. But I mean, it was such a major part of who we were, and even like today, my younger brother and sister, they don't speak Ghana, but they know all the food. And that was something that was so important to me. When we were growing up in the U.S., people would always ask questions like, "Oh, you're from Africa. What did you eat when you were in Africa?" And so that was always a big question, exactly. And I remember giving them the list of all the different things that I I ate growing up when we were living in Ghana. But then when I moved back 10 years ago, all of a sudden this variety was gone. And all I kept seeing was rice everywhere. And for me, it made me sad, but I also was asking myself, like, where did this variety go? Some of the dishes that I wanted to cook, I remember, talking to my team about it, and they were like, we have no idea what you're talking about. And I thought maybe it was my pronunciation, so like I went back and I asked my mom how to say it correctly, and it was that these dishes were considered old-fashioned and were not part of the repertoire. And for me, when I think about our food system, it's like, who's growing these ingredients, who's no longer going to have work? Who was making these dishes, and why is it that now we're only eating this? I mean, I have the answers to it. A lot of it has to do with convenience and availability, but all of a sudden you're realizing that huge parts of our food culture, which includes, festivals and celebrations and things like that, are actually no longer available. And I know it happens here. I mean, it happens everywhere in the world I've been. There has been a sort of globalization and streamlining of food, and it's getting smaller and smaller. And so when we talk about, the fact that there's like thousands of plants that we eat, and like 75% of them are coming from wheat, corn, soy, and rice, it means that there's it's basically like 4 monocrops, right? So diversity in plants life, but also diversity in like just flavor. And I think it's important to just eat diversely. Like I always say, I mean, this is one of those things, you're supposed to eat the rainbow. You're supposed to eat all the different colors. You're supposed to, it's not supposed to look like one thing. And as a chef, it just makes me really curious to know what else there is out there, or what have we forgotten about. So yeah.
Beautiful answer, and I completely agree. I mean, for me, food culture is identity, right? Like, what do you identify with? And like a country can show itself through its food so much. And you say, hey, I'm from India. Yeah, you guys have such cool food. And when it's from, hey, I'm from Ghana, silence. Like, people, they would maybe come up with, okay, you guys have jollof rice, but or fufu, but not much more. And we have so much, and it's not just all brown. It's also very diverse. And for me, when Ghana Food Movement says we celebrate food culture, we are really proud of the food culture that we have. Especially, I think, like from a personal perspective, I'm super proud of the ingredients that we have. The ingredients that reach back so many years. And yes, like Selassie said, they're vanishing from our plates. People are going more towards imported goods. Ghana is one of the countries that has one of the highest import rates. And then also I can see it within my family. Their food culture is also vanishing because they like to identify with the West. They like to identify with what's coming from Europe, and they always want me to bring everything that's coming from outside. And even when it comes to foods like that you would say, hey, you guys should have that in Ghana, right? Like rice. They'd rather have the rice from China than the one that's locally grown. And so for me, food culture in the end is identity. What do you identify with? And it's a bit sad to see that more and more of these things identify less with. But I feel there's a lot of hope, because there's initiatives like Juice is doing, like Selassie is doing, like the Ghana Food Movement is doing.
I totally agree. I think all you said is like, food is the same. Like, I can agree with Selassie. I think every Ghanaian can agree that you grow up that every day your mother cooked for you, or so. But when I was in Ghana, there was more varieties, and the last time, I think this was 2021 when he was in Ghana with the kids, and accidentally we could not fly back because whatever. We have to stay overnight in a hotel. And I was surprised because on the next day there was a buffet, and I was shocked because I found all this food that was in my childhood. I didn't saw them on the streets anymore. And this was a special occasion that, like every Sunday, they make like they call it original buffet. And I was like, that is normal buffet. So, and I make a lot of pictures. I was showing the hey, look this. I don't know the name, but this tastes good. And I was like going through. I even called my parents, come over, see the food. So, and even my dad was trying to explain for me like which kind of food is it, and I found out I lost by myself the names and all what is the ingredients, but I remember how good they was, and this was like very sad because from that moment I tried to understand that I didn't notice it, but now I understand that a lot of things are, as you say, vanished, right? They are get out of system, and I was very very sad about it. And because I was asking my friend, where can we eat this? Nobody eat this. And I was like, what? But it was good. So, yeah, but it's old. And so everyone wants, and as you say, everybody wants only Jollof, and really, not diverse. It's like only the same situation. So even in Ghana, it's not easy to get the, how you say, raw things from the, and back in the days. So for me it's important to keep all these things alive, and that's why I get otherwise connected with a Ghana food movement. When I found out they was doing it, I was like, okay, there's something you need to support it because they try to establish and keep the old as ingredients, the food, the heritage, the food heritage, like alive for the next generation. And I didn't realize that it was a huge, big destroying or banishment for the old food. That I found out in talking with Ghana movement, then I saw it by myself. So for me, it's a lot of a culture. It's as you say, it's the way you can express your culture to another country. It's the same like when I was recently in the US. It's like when I see the food is not. Yeah, I was, this was not that much, and this like, but when people say, hey, go back to Africa, or Africa didn't get something, I was like, you got burgers, we get a lot of things, but nobody knows, and even we are destroyed by our own because we are so, I don't know if it's harsh, but manipulate or to brainwashed with the Western food that we are like banish our own good heritage of food, and this is the situation we have right
now. Okay. But to be honest, like I totally see your points because when I was preparing for this talk, I was also like I don't know what Ghana food culture is like. I don't know what the dishes are. I don't know what the ingredients are. Can you go a little bit deeper into it and explain to us maybe also do you have some ingredients that are really specific for that area, and also we talk about like the heritage is lost, but why is it so important that we come back, and maybe you can then explain a little bit about your work with the farmers directly, so we can have a little bit of an idea of like how does the agriculture look like, the ingredients, and also the cuisine.
I think my opinion is why I think it's very important because when I grew up and like when I we said vergleichen, compared to back in the days right now, I saw that a lot of people in Ghana, like right now, they get illnesses which they didn't get before, because when I was growing up, even my kids saw my, how do you say, grandmother, she was still alive. So they saw the grandmother of my father, they saw because she was still alive. So that means when she was living in the village, she was cooking by her own, never get like buying food from outside. She grow everything by herself. And in my opinion is that when I was growing up, this kind of food, there was kind of illness because of like hygienic situations, but not because of the food. Yeah. And today in Ghana, when we saw the people, there's a lot of people, what do you say? Overweight. Yeah.
There's obesity, there's diabetes.
Diabetes is a lot of issues they got there. This is like a system which you get more like in the Western world is much more there, and they are not treating well like do the doctors. And a lot of things is like if they change the food back to the how you can say old system, I think you can even banish a lot of all these illnesses. And this is a huge situation that's why it's important to keep the culture alive, because all these old people in the villages, they know what is good for them, and they try it, and it's what doing generations to generations was keep up. But right now it's like the youngest one didn't know anymore, and this is I think it's a big mistake and not a good situation right now.
Just to maybe for those that have no clue about Ghanaian ingredients, I think Selassie can give us a much better view on this. But Ghana, in the end, Ghana is a hot country, so of course we have a lot of ingredients and crops that are more geared towards they need to like hold like what is it more that's the thing, I don't even know the German.
Durable.
Durable, it's durable, much more durable, right? Because Ghana is still dealing with a lot of people don't have fridges, and then we have shortages, so you need to have grains that are durable. Crops in general. So we have millets, we have sorghum, we have rice, even though I feel still not enough rice to decrease that high import of rice. Then we have contomere, which we use in a lot of stew, which is like a leaf. We have cassava, yam, which are tubers. Yes, thank you. Tubers. Kind of like potatoes, but more tasty, I feel. And then you turn a lot of like cassava, plantain, yam. You make it a lot of these maize. You make it into doughs, which are then called benku and kinke. And you can keep these even like without the fridge for quite a long time. That's just a small excursion into some foods. But I think Selassie can say more.
So I'll use my geographical background first. So in terms of like we'll just go by biomes, right? So there's along the coast, it's much more tropical. You look at the plantains, coconuts, etc. Then you go to the middle belt, and then there's a lot more tubers there. So if you look at the cuisine from the southern part of Ghana, and it's interesting because, for example, there's a lot of corn-based dishes, but corn is not indigenous. So I always ask myself, what were we using before the corn came along? And a lot of it is probably the millets and the sorghums. So then you've got the middle belt, which has a lot of tubers. So you've got cassava, yams, and all of those, and that's where you'll see, I call it the fufu kitchen. So like the middle belt is where a lot of those are boiled and then pounded to make fufu. Then you've got the Sahelian part of the country where you'll get a lot more of the grains such as the millets and the sorghum. So and when you look at that area, those grains are, they don't require a lot of water. They are drought tolerant. They do not need a lot of fertilizer, like synthetic fertilizers or inputs. And so when I came back and I started thinking about like what should we be eating in 2050, or what does the future look like, I'm like, and when people say to me, I had one person, when I first started, I was like trying to write a cookbook and I was somewhere in New York and I was talking to a publisher and they're like, why would an American want to read an African cookbook? Like, that was literally what they said to me. And I started working my rebuttal. From that moment, I started working on my rebuttal. I soon left thereafter. But the answer for me now is also like, well, one is like it's tasty, but the other part is that if you want to think about what the world should be thinking about and what the world should be eating, those are the ingredients that are going to be climate smart, climate tolerant, and those are the ingredients that if we lose those recipes and lose those formulations, we actually have lost a whole bunch of things that we could be eating in the future. Again, I'll even add all those ingredients are also gluten free. So that with all these food allergies that are coming up, that's also a lot of the solutions to those problems, dietary issues. So that's just in terms of the zones, and then I would just adding to some of the flavors. I would say that we tend to be like much more bold flavors, and a lot of the bold flavors are linked to the preservation techniques that we use. So because we live in as a chef, I would say we have something in the kitchen that's called the danger zone. Like you do not leave food in this temperature because a lot of bacteria will grow. So that's the danger zone. We live in the danger zone. The temperature is that temperature all year round, right? Except now it's our winter time. So and so what happens is you realize, I was talking to my aunt one day and she was like, she was a nurse, and so she was saying when she got she grew up in Tamale, and then when she got her posting, she was, after you finish, they give you a location to go, and so she was working along the coast. And she said that they would sometimes finish work, and they would go to the coast and pick up fish and help the fishermen bring in the net. And she said that sometimes they would the fishermen would bring fresh fish, and she'd be hiding in her house. So I'm like, someone came to give you a gift of free fish. Why would you be hiding in your house? She was like, I didn't have a fridge. And I was like, oh, okay. So I was like, what did you do? Then I want to understand. So she said the very first day, she would actually steam the fish and make light soup or some kind of fresh fish stew. Then she would actually take some and then fry it, but fry it really hard. So I started understanding our cooking techniques, because sometimes I used to, a lot of people complain that the meat is overcooked and the chicken is over fried. People are trying to remove all the water content out of there to make sure it doesn't spoil. So she would fry it to make sure it was firm enough that she didn't have a fridge. That's what she was doing. Then some of it she would take to people, and they would salt it. So they salt it, and then that becomes your salted fish. Some of it also gets fermented, so that's your momoni and other kinds of fish. Then there's another version where they smoke it, and that flavor is there, and it's also now the water's coming out because you have. So this is just one example of fish and how you can eat it for many, many weeks and months based on how you prepare it, right? So she then actually explained to me, I really got the chance to understand the culinary space. And even when you go to food sellers, the reason people don't get sick from street food is because they've already preempted the meat and have made the meat as dry as possible. So it's not like we don't actually, we like really hard. But I mean, I would say culturally we've removed the water content, so that's what we've become used to. So that's what the flavors and the way in which we eat. So when they use the smoked or salted fish, it's an umami bomb. So imagine even a bean stew with a little bit of smoked fish. That flavor is a strong, bold flavor, and so we also use a lot of chilies. I know, for example, in French cooking, you have your mirepoix, which is the celery, carrots, and onions. For us, it's onions, garlic, and ginger. That's our trio. That's what we start the base of all cooking with, and then that's about it.
I mean, then it sounds so easy just to be like, oh yeah, I'm bringing back these flavors on the plate and let's go. And then I imagine, at least here, a lot of people struggling with actually getting the old varieties. I'm talking supply chain, right? We had a little conversation before. How did you start working with small-scale farmers? Why small-scale farmers? And how is the situation right now with just in general getting these ingredients, the availability, where do you source from, and what's the path in the future?
I would say that when I first moved back to Ghana, I was a little bit judgy. I moved back and I was like, why are people doing things this way? And and I actually had a really negative perspective about So when I moved back, a lot of the restaurants, when I first moved back, it was mostly hotel restaurants, but then around that time, independent restaurants started opening. Well, I wouldn't call them independent, but they're just not hotels. Like I would say standalone restaurants started opening up. I kind of remember feeling like, wow, they didn't really try, they're just importing everything. Now, if you're a hotel that is putting out a breakfast for, 500 people or 300 people every morning, you want orange juice and you need this much orange juice every day, etc. So then you realize from their, commercial perspective, they need certain things and they need it at a certain frequency and a quantity that was not available and still not always available locally. So they brought in food. Some of the original restaurants that were standalone restaurants actually developed because the owners had import businesses. So they were importing wine, they were importing food, and they were like, let's just get a chef from Lebanon and we're just gonna open a Italian restaurant. So it became something that their entire business model was built on importation. And then I came along and I was like, I'm gonna go ahead and do this thing, but I need the ingredients. And then when you go to the market, you find that the market is also streamlined. The market women want to sell what other people want to eat, and they want to just move the product quickly, and so that's what you find. And then I would either remember an ingredient, or I would become curious and start looking for things outside of the normal. And that's just taken me on a journey where, for example, I wanted cashew apple, because I remember doing one trip in Nigeria and just stopping on the street. And so the cashew tree, the cashew nuts that they come from a tree that has almost like it looks like a little apple, and on the bottom there's like the little comma, which is actually the cashew. And so what happens is when it's time, everyone goes and picks off just the bottom part, just the nuts, and leaves the rest of the apple to like fall off the tree and rot. So, but they're delicious, they're really, really good. And so I said, okay, I want to turn it into a jam and bring it into the dessert for my next menu. It costs more for me to transport the apples, the cashew apples, from the northern regions of Ghana than it cost me to buy them from the farmer. So then you realize that the value chains that exist are for either export, which is the cash crops, or it's for the mass market, which means that it's kind of dummied down. And I think that for me, it is serendipitous, but I think I love the research part of my business. So I don't want to have a 9 to 5 sort of 7 days a week restaurant. And so I've kept it as a really sort of fluid space. And we also don't cook for a lot of people, so I can afford to change my menu whenever I need to. I can't afford that we only have X amount of this ingredient, and so we're gonna serve it as a sauce or as whatever we can do. And so I think the future is that the more chefs that are looking for these ingredients, the better it is for that value chain to get developed. So like even now, I'll go to a farmer and he's like, yeah, I got that. And I was like, could I have some? And he's like, he's thinking to himself, like, this woman is gonna waste my time because like she's doing one dinner every however many for 20 people, and that's not gonna put my child through school, right? Like, I get it, like it makes sense that he needs a bigger market. So I can work those deals out with people that are doing different things who have like-mindedness, but I think the win is when we have enough people asking for these ingredients to allow them to move forward. But I also feel, like I personally don't talk about ingredients as much as I used to. I went to an event a few years ago and they were doing some ingredient that comes from West Africa, and I was like, wow, that's really cool. Let me see what they did with it. So I went to taste what they did with it, and the guy goes, are you Chef Selassie from Ghana? And I'm like, yes, I am. And he's like, I hope you don't mind, I have your presentation your photo in my presentation. And I'm like, when are you presenting? And he's like, tomorrow. So I'm like, I'll be there. So anyway, long story short, it's a company that's an American company, and they are buying this ingredient and like making mass business for it. But I think the question I'm asking myself is, how do we not go the road of cocoa? How do we become a finished product in country so that value stays in country rather than the continued extraction economy for these ingredients? So even when people are like, jollof, 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 I'm like, fantastic. but how much of the benefit of Jollof hitting the global stage is supporting smallholder farmers in West Africa. So if we say what Jollof belongs to West Africa, because I'm not going to get into the Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, Gambia conversation, but I think for me the point is, if it's a West African specialty, then what is it? How are West African producers benefit? Because the rice that's being used in the Jollof rice is not coming from West Africa. The tomatoes are not coming. The spice blends are not coming. So we are, in many ways, extracting something from the continent without giving back. And I know that sometimes there are either diasporan or other chefs that are maybe doing collaborations. But I think that, sorry, I would just say that, like, I think for me, if we take a look, and this is what I've heard, I don't have 100% evidence, but if, for example, the Thai model is true, whereby they said we want our food to be all over the world. So tell me if anyone thinks this is not true, but this is what I've heard. And from my research, Thai government says Thai food is going everywhere. We need Thai restaurants in every country. We need to have trained chefs that are going to go there and lead those kitchens. We need investors that are going to invest in these businesses. We need ingredients that are going to be grown and processed here, like sauces that are base sauces that are going to bring money back to Thailand. And then all of a sudden, Thai food being popular all over the world benefits Thailand. And I think that's, for me, like the thing that keeps pushing in my mind about the conversation is, beyond us saying new flavors, how are we making sure, I call them culinary custodians, whether they're the growers, whether they're the aunties, who are these custodians that need to make sure, because like, I've also had people tell me, bring some fantastic recipes, we know you have contacts with all these people, and I'm like, fantastic, what's the budget for them? And they're like, their names are gonna be, we're gonna give them visibility. And I'm like, they don't need visibility, they need to send their kids to college. Like, that's what they need. So I think for me, those are some of the conversations that I want us to start having alongside. Yeah.
Sorry, because this is a perfect bridge, because Lydia, I know that talking about custodians, the Ghana food movement is also doing a lot for like young people and bringing them into the food scene and making them little custodians and ambassadors. Can you talk a little bit about that project?
Yes, well, we basically have different projects or programs in the Ghana food movement, and one of them, for example, is the Youth and Food Program, which is so all of our programs are actually geared towards youth, and the Youth and Food Program is geared towards young people who come from university and they really want to do something in the food industry, but they can't find jobs. They don't have, they don't have the connections, the network to actually do something, and that's where Ghana Food Movement steps in, and we basically say, okay, do they want to become entrepreneurs? Do they want to, get a job in the food industry? And if they want to get a job in the food industry, they become part of the Youth and Food Program, and they do a course in, they get like various skills training. Sometimes it can be like super basic things that they learn, because they have all the knowledge when it comes to food, but just like applying for a job or things like this. So yeah, that's basically preparing them for the food industry. But then we have so many people also who say like, hey, I grew up on a mango farm and I want to do more with the mango. I know how you can use the mango skin. I know how you can use the seed in different ways, but I don't have a space. So that's where the Ghana Food Movement also comes in again. So we are currently building, which is called The Kitchen, a food education hub. I actually would rather like to call it food capacity hub, because like I said, I really feel a lot of education or knowledge is actually out there already, but people just don't have access to space. And in the food education hub, people or young people can come and do food research, food innovation, and start their own business. And I feel, linking it back to food custodians, I feel it is also about preserving, but it's also about how can I transform this while it is still connected to my culture, but still, taking it a little bit also into the next century. And I feel that's what Ghana Food Movement is all about.
I heard there's also a crowdfunding campaign for it or something, right?
Yeah.
just small, just a small info.
I mean, just to let people understand the context of gastronomy or the food space in Ghana. If you wanted a space to do a restaurant in a nice part of Accra where you feel like you would get like middle class clients, we're talking about probably $15,000 to $25,000 a month, and you need to pay 2 years in advance. So if you are a young chef or not so young chef, and you're trying to create something that's already the real estate is a large chunk. The equipment that you can find in Ghana is not actually restaurant level equipment, so you need to import it. But then we have all these like power cuts, and you have to have a generator, and there's fluctuations, voltage going from 180 to 280, and so it blows out equipment. And then you don't have anyone that can repair it because the companies haven't set up, engineers that know how to fix that equipment. You've also got, farmers who are not used to producing a certain quality and quantity of product for gastronomy, and all these other things. So when people say like, we're not on the list of countries that, Michelin goes to visit, but at the same point, even if we just, like for example, I'll even say that, if you wanted to be in that space, the barriers to entry are huge. And the challenges are huge until there's enough people doing it for it to be an interesting enough investment case for companies and investors, because we also don't have, people investing in that space of, hey, I'm gonna give you money to open a restaurant because I know my returns will be, X, Y, and Z, because there's not that many people coming to Ghana that would sort of move an economy to do that. So I just want to give some context to why it's really important to have these spaces where people can start. Like when I moved back to Ghana, I had to build it myself because it didn't exist.
Yeah, super interesting. Time is running a little bit, but I want to ask two last questions. I want to go into the chocolate topic really quickly because I think it's such a huge topic, and I think we could have a whole evening just about chocolate. But I just want to know, ethically produced chocolate. What does it mean? Like, what do you do? What's the difference? What is the status of the chocolate industry right now? Because I believe that we will have to talk about this in the future a lot because it's becoming a luxury product because climate change is actually happening, and we will feel it in, for example, with chocolate. But you will talk about that a little bit, and then maybe afterwards, real quick about the Berlin scene, and you guys can also talk to them later about all the other topics again. But just these two topics. Chocolate first. Sorry.
I was thinking that we should start with the beans first.
Yeah, start with the beans.
I think she did. Yeah. No, I mean, okay. So, where do we start? So, Ghana is a place where we are still working on legislation for the contemporary moment. So. When cocoa was introduced, it's a cash crop, so it means that you need to sell. And I'll say it from the perspective of a Ghanaian. You need to grow something that somebody else wants, that you have no use for, and grow it and then sell it to them at a price that they determine, and then you in exchange will get whatever they decide to give you back, so that you can buy what you actually need. So for me, it was actually a lot of our cash crops are the equivalent of the decimation of our indigenous agriculture. So you're telling me, stop growing what you eat. Rather, I'm going to give you some money for however I see fit, so that you can now buy back what you need to buy internationally. So I always say it's like the original lie, because it forces you into an interdependent relationship, whereas honestly in Ghana, you can grow pretty much everything you need to eat. And you will see it because a lot of people are growing for their own countries using the land in Ghana. But cocoa, is being grown there, and the original plan is we're gonna, as government, give inputs to the cocoa farmers and support them with technology, etc., for them to grow these beans. And we, as the Ghanaian government, will buy it back from you, and then we will use that, sell it internationally, and then use it to support our education and our health system. So that's the plan. Now, it moves in that direction, but then it moves off that direction. But I mean, honestly, if you look at Nkrumah,
this was the plan.
It was a plan, because if you look, there are amazing silos that were built in the late 50s, and the silos were actually saying, in a year where there's a lot of cocoa, we're going to store it and wait for the international price to go up, and then we're going to sell the beans when we can make more money. There was a whole strategy, but anyway, we're where we are. So basically, the legal infrastructure in Ghana says it is illegal for me or anybody else to buy cocoa beans from a cocoa farmer. You have to actually have a license from the buying company. The government gives you a license, but the price to get that license is so high that only certain mass levels of corporations can afford it, right? So what's happening is all the beans are being, and everyone knows the history, but I think for it to change, what's happening is there are a lot of artisanal makers that are starting to do small and medium-sized enterprises that are doing it. For example, when I started making chocolate in 2015, my first thought was, my parents are lawyers, I was like, I don't want to get arrested. And so I decided that I'm also a chef, so what I'm good at is flavor. So I decided to become a chocolatier. So I do the confectionery side. I work with a company that is actually processing it from the beans into couverture, which is like chocolate drops or bars or whatever. So they make that, I take it and then I make it into a confectionery by infusing it with beautiful flavors, wrapping it around nuts or whatever, and so I do the confectionery side of it because it was, one, something that I felt I had a better capacity to do, and two, because there was no legal framework. So what you see now is that there are people who are artisanal makers, who some of them are doing it illegally because there is no actual new legislation. They're from cocoa farm communities, and then they buy the beans from the cocoa farmer, and then they process. But they know who their farmer is, and they actually have full traceability, but because of the legislation, they can't really say it fully, completely. But it's since 2020, the government has been in the process of having discussions around it. The truth is, there's millions of dollars at stake, and so it's not something that's going to change tomorrow. And the cocoa board is, a political appointee, so like there's a lot of, it's going to take a long time for it to change. And I think in terms of the future, we will have to get to a point where it's so painful for the large companies and for the cocoa producing countries that they're going to have to come to a negotiation. Right now, it's like everybody is talking at each other and no one is listening. I actually had a chance to go to a meeting a few years ago with the big 5 European companies, and I also was there. Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire were there, and I had to do the keynote. And it was, for me, no, but I mean, the thing is, I threw everybody under the bus because I don't belong anywhere. I'm like, you, Ghana, you, Cargill, So I think for me, the issue is this. The median age of Ghanaian cocoa farmer is in their early 60s, which means there's a problem. If no young person is going into the industry, then we are killing the industry, which means there's going to be less beans, they're going to be more expensive, and it becomes even more luxury. Now, other people are saying, we're doing cocoa-free chocolate. What does that mean? Thousands of farmers all over the world are going to lose their jobs because we can't figure out how to have an equitable system. We're going to be forced into a conversation. I think it's the consumers that are going to have to speak up. I think it's because the governments and the larger companies are benefiting so much from this that they are not going to be able to see it until the system breaks down. But I think for the future of cocoa farmers and for the future for us as consumers and the middle businesses, we have to find a way to start shouting through advocacy. And I think it is important to have ethical chocolate. I think that one of the challenges we have is somehow people think that if chocolate is made in West Africa, I'm the problem. I'm not the problem. I know exactly who my farmers are, and I know where my chocolate comes from. The big companies are the ones that have so much at stake that they're the ones that are, so I think, for example, people will troll me on Instagram and slave chocolate from Ghana. I'm like, it's from Ghana. Did you ask that question of all the major chocolate companies, or did you just assume that because I'm an African and I'm making the chocolate in Africa that I'm the problem? So I think we need to start asking questions. Where does it come from? Who's making it? Who's benefiting from it? To start to be able to answer some of these questions. And I do agree that chocolate should be expensive. If you've seen the cocoa farmers do the work, they deserve every penny. Like, I think that when we talk about beans, it is handcrafted. They plant the trees by hand. They cut the pods down by hand. They open each pod by hand. They take it out and ferment it by hand in plantain leaves or banana leaves. They dry it by hand in the rainy season, which means every time there's a drop of rain, they have to go and roll up their mat in the middle of the night and like hide it until it dries and then it's all sun dry. So we should not want cheap chocolate because it means we're not paying somebody fairly for the risk of being an agriculturalist. So let's eat high quality, good chocolate. It's gonna be more expensive than you would like it to be, but the question is, what % of that chocolate bar is going to either cocoa producing countries, labor in those countries? Because right now it's 2%.
Yeah, to be continued. This discussion, next event will be on chocolate. Then we'll do 3 hours just on chocolate. And we're going to take a really harsh turn because my last question is just to Juice, because I also do want to know, like, what is the history of African diaspora here in Berlin, and what is the food in regards to food, and what is also the food scene right now? Maybe keep it a tiny bit shorter.
I'm very best in it, not. Yeah, the history was like, when I was growing up here in Germany, we don't have the access to the ingredients what we need for cooking our food. So you have to buy them. For example, if you need manioc or yam, you have to go to Gaedke and pay a lot of money for it. So it was like more a luxury thing to cook your own food here in Germany. But time changed. Now you can get all these ingredients in so-called African shops, Afro shops, and also a big monopoly, or this is the Afghanish, Chinese supermarkets where you can now get also the ingredients. So it's quite easier to get all these ingredients for a lot of people here right now. So things have changed. And right now, what I can say is that we have, as you say, like, for example, this is the Thai, this was a huge, now it makes sense. It makes sense for me. But it's like African cuisine is underrepresented in Germany, even also in the whole European countries. And this is where we have to start, and our aim with African Food Festival is, first of all, to make a knowledge about, hey, we are here, and the food is diverse, and there are a lot of people, they are very talented to do their own thing, but they have no access to the, how you say, the gastronomy part. Also, for example, what the people are facing in Ghana, they face also here to get the investments, to get the right places. It's not so expensive like in Accra, but it's also expensive for someone who wants to start like this kind of businesses. And what we do is, like with African Food Fest, we try to give like people, they are very, very, how do you say, take it seriously, to bring them, for instance, like even Aji, who's outside, he was starting with like a little bit small, and Yana saw her talent. You say, Aji. and this was, Yana also, oh, she's so good, she needs her own restaurant. And this was like, we have to support everything I have, I want to put in it. And so she was like, trying to call everyone, hey, do you know we get a new vendor? She was very fine, and she was like, push even me, or hit location, was like, hey guys, you don't want to get Aji? I was like, we got our own catering, but she said, no, you have to get her. So we are trying to basically push every boundaries and every how do you say, possibilities to support all these people. And also the idea which came by Diana was also like doing like our own academy to train them how to benefit from like all these markets, or to start a small business, know what is important to get all these bureaucracy forms and all this you need. So this is a small step, and everything is not founded. So it's like doing by our own private money and everything, try to accomplish and to push forward. It's not that quite easy, but the future is bright, and I see that a lot of people coming up and a lot of people are interested. And for instance, like Aji, so if all of you are interested in something, I can put my hands in, how you say, fire for her, invest it, you would not regret it. Yeah? Das ist nicht bereuen. That's so, but that's the small businesses starting right now with small, like in Ghana we call chop bars. It's like small business, not quite restaurants. It's like quick getting your food. But I see like for instance we get every Friday the the Ayoka bar here. So every Friday we are open outside and doing our own drinks. Like this is the drinks we don't find anywhere else. It's like ingredients I got from Ghana and get a person to mix them only for the bar. So I'm playing with all these type of African ingredients, African type of things, but not too pushy and to bring like in high quality. And this is why I saw a lot of people when got in conversations. I found that a lot of people are interested to do businesses. They are not how do you say that? They are not they don't dare to. They are a little bit scared of risk and all this thing. So I got a lot of consultants. And sometimes fighters say, "Hey, do your thing." And I don't got the money. I say, "Yeah, but go for it." And I was like, "You will do it, boy." But it's like there's a movement. There's a little step by step, and I think in the next few years we will see a lot of, hopefully, see a lot of people making the businesses and trying to maintain this, quite diverse in Berlin. Yeah, but we get a lot of Chinese and yeah. But I have hope for African cuisine.
And you're giving it the platform, so thank you.